Hello, my name is Micaiah Stevens. This is game design number 3? Question mark. Anyways, I'm working on a game for Hamlet. It's on for Haven Studios. It's on Steam now. It's sort of the driving force behind these design videos. Is they're not just talking about design or as an abstract concept, or kind of I like Code Monkey's probably a good example of someone who's doing talking about features. He's doing it through programming. We might do some of that, but he seems to have a better handle on it. Anyway, so we're just. But as a programmer, it scratches one itch, as some people say. The other itch is game design. I really love it. So we're going to talk about game design. So, anyways, I work for a company called Haven Studios. You can email. They have an email set up for me for. I have an email set up for myself. Support at havenstudios.net. You can leave a comment and very open to contact. So, anyways, we're game design number 3. Introduction. You are here. Yes, that joke has made it into this one. We're talking about future design, and then we're going to be talking about game design number 3, which is tentatively entitled. Well, it's entitled Expansive Combat. We're going to be talking about the MikHaven as a traditional Wario ethos, and then we're going to talk about the real fantasy Wario ethos and conclusion next, and we'll round it out with Hamlet. So, what happened? Hello. There we go. Okay, so game design number 3. What question mark? So, this has been rebranded. We have come out with a previous one. We talked a little bit on the channel update. We need to do a little behind-the-scene management work, which is always documentation is the last thing that gets delayed. But anyway, so this is kind of a new sort of push to come out with focus on game design. And this is kind of game design number 1, but we're calling it 3 because we think, there's a few. Maybe we'll have to edit the video and say, hey, this is actually, see the title before for the actual comment. Anyways, this one's called Expansive Combat and Roguelike Games, and it's by Micaiah Stevens. It was a short paper I wrote, sort of talked about this general idea, and the IE, or in other words, it's about inventory. So, future. This is talking about the future idea. There's no promises. This is a huge caveat. There's no order. It's not planned. Don't take everything with a grain of salt. But these are sort of kind of where we're working on. It's I work on so many projects, so many different ideas and projects, and this is kind of my sort of. I sort of have a good idea. Like we talked about the point 10, point 0. Oh, no, it is the point 10. Yeah, I thought it should probably be called the point 01. Maybe it should be called the point 01. Yeah, I think it actually should. Anyway, so no, I guess it wouldn't make any sense. Anyway, so point 1, it's just an internal number. It means absolutely nothing. It just means, hey, we actually kicked this off about quite a few months ago. Which is not really talking about game design, but we felt like keeping track of things and getting things updated is really important. Anyway, so we're talking about dungeons for our point 1 update. We talked about in the devlog released a few days ago, and then in the future, we're not sure when, but we also have items that we're working on, and then at some point we have this combat system. We have a lot of this in place. We're just not sure. So then there's the point 1 question mark. So now we're close to this sort of design idea. This kind of talks about how far this design idea is out there in terms of what we want to do. We want to add in more unique things into our game, and this is one of the things we've been thinking about in terms of design and talking about it. And sort of the this whole series is going to be just crazy theories and not any code. Anyway, so. Yeah, so let's talk about MikHaven as the traditional Wario ethos. He's a human, so we've, eventually, hopefully, no promises, but it's kind of one of the things we talked about at some point is having, where you can design your character. It's mostly about having the artwork and what, exactly what we're going to do and how you create the characters and all sorts of things and genetics and all sorts of crazy ideas. Anyway, so we can say this is talking about MikHaven. I should maybe talk about MikHaven. He is he's my online name that I really love. It's not MikHaven or anything. It's just a really awesome name. As you can see, my name is Micaiah. It's not Mike. Anyway, but Mick is actually pretty awesome. it's we kind of we it was I think we were the butcher a long time ago in gaming, the game sort of design, and then but then we really wanted something unique as the internet sort of took place. So MikHaven was it, and we started playing World of Warcraft in 2000, way long time. We created our first. Well, we actually created several characters, but then we chose MikHaven. He was a human. And then we was, it's amazing. We're talking about traditional warrior ethos, and here we are. So we're a human warrior. We started out as a tank, but as we know, warriors have 2 DPS roles, but they have no heal role. And you're like, well, why is that a concern? Well, Mick then we started coming up with this idea of Mick as MIK as our main name. So we just MikX was he was our heal role. It wasn't actually his design because he was an elf druid. Well, that's interesting. Elf druids can be tanks. Sweet. And as you know, if the story goes that they can also have a DPS role. No, it's not a melee DPS. It's a ranged DPS, but they actually have 2 DPS roles, including. Oh wait, notice a big font size change. There is actually 2 DPS roles as the melee and range. So it's like you kind of think of the traditional warrior ethos as that the warrior as the druid can be this melee, in your face class, but then they have the heal spells and which you can use your heal spells. They have all these things that is just crazy to think about versus this tank, and I think that sort of really harms. Thankfully, we're not doing the trifecta of tank, heals, and DPS, but it really kind of highlights this idea of having a warrior in the game and what does that mean, and that's kind of the focus of this topic. Anyway, so then what does the warrior mean? So we have MikHaven. He has a main hand weapon and an offhand shield and includes armor. So we have this really awesome, kind of looked up this, Googled a bunch of concepts for warriors. And we found this real awesome, well, I've never actually read this book. It's called Lost Worlds. It's a fantasy combat game book produced by Nova. And then it's designed by Alfred Leonardi. Anyway, so it's an awesome picture. Really like it. It's a kind of a round buckler shield with a maybe a kind of a short. Well, it's kind of a long sword. Maybe it's not quite a broadsword, but it could be. But it's sort of this. But then the idea behind this guy is, I think we're going to talk about that. Yeah. So the idea behind this guy is where's his food and his water, and how is he going to hold his loot, and how is he going to carry his gold. And the real general consensus of this guy is he's a soldier in an army. These, we can think of castles that support these large armies, such as, the supply chain of, I want to say Leonard the Great, but Alexander the Great was the sort of the Greek. Rome. Anyways, kind of before that, he had a huge, army. But part of that was his massive supply chain back to his homeland. So he had maybe, 5,000 sort of not. This is sort of the Knight's Age, but he had soldiers, and this is sort of that. We kind of think of this warrior ethos as a soldier that is supported by the caravans and supplies and chains and stuff like that. And maybe we could do that, but the kind of idea, as in a dungeon roguelike example, that your town is above, but you're sort of delving into a dungeon. And if you're really going to do that, you want to maybe look like this chick, this awesome sort of expanded upon that. This is kind of getting into this idea of this real fantasy warrior ethos, which is kind of funny because one of my WoW tank buddies is named Ethos or Ethos, however you want to say that. It's ethos when you're talking about the I think the understood terminology, but you could actually, I think that's probably what he's intended his name, but anyway, so this is from the Dungeon Rat. We like to, if you're going to make share a copyrighted image, we feel like you should post. So we found this on the dungeonrat.com, and it's for the Pathfinder game, which is a really awesome game. And the sort of Pathfinder is a sort of an RPG sort of book. You can sort of see this is one of maybe the character sheets for their warrior. Maybe I'm not familiar with Pathfinder. Pathos. I'm not familiar with Pathfinder, but they actually have this really cool. I actually thought about picking up their new game, and I don't know if the dungeon book is their combat or the dungeon guide is related to the Pathfinder game, but it's being published by Owlcat Games now, and it's available on Steam. Pathfinder Adventures, I think it's called. It's on our wish list to pick up. But anyway, so you can see this warrior. Yeah, so it's the fantasy warrior ethos. I think this is kind of really what a warrior would look like. You can see that they're seriously geared. They could also be called maybe a mercenary, a bounty hunter. This is the person that you would, and you're going into a dungeon. This is what you really want to look like. Even though not so much chain versus plate, versus leather versus cloth. That's sort of the armor type of the character. We're talking about that this person has a shield and a sword, but they also have a bow, which is kind of like, as someone that's kind of like it's more like the mercenary bounty hunter, because you really want to think of like have to be this self-contained fighter that is really you don't know what you're gonna do. You've been hired to go into this dungeon. You have no idea what's down there. So this is what I think most people would go, like mercenaries or special forces. That's maybe a more modern day example is, sending a soldier versus how we send special forces. We send special forces more geared like this, where they are packing more gear, uh, lighter gear, but depends on their supply chain. But you can see sort of they have a sword, but then they also have the bow, sort of that long range combat, and then they have this dagger. There's some sort of medicine sort of it's kind of like you think about a roguelike where it's like you're back. That's kind of why it's i.e. inventory is what we're talking about here. It's like you have a ton of other stuff, including the cape, which is sort of protection. Yeah, so then it's sort of, compared to this guy, he has, food, no water. Where's he going to hold his loot, his gold? That's also a similar problem to this person, that you don't get around the fact that you can only carry so much gear. That's, I think, one of the coolest example was Dungeon Siege. I think they were one of the, I wouldn't want to say one of the first examples, but in a roguelike, it was not, it was like an RPG with dungeon exploring. They actually had a pack animal, and that was really cool. And the pack animal would sort of follow you around. There's a new game. I can't remember the name of it. Sorry, it's a new online game that's coming out that's sort of similar to that. And you can have a llama and various things. Oh, I should. Anyways, it's really awesome. I'll have a link hopefully in the description below of this video. Anyway, so it's kind of one of the ideas, so that that there needs. We haven't quite figured out how we're going to do that sort of supply chain management, but it's sort of also part of the town. Is, in our game, the town is going to be your supply chain as well. Anyway, so then we're going to talk about this weight. And we're like, weight is really bad, and that's sort of like, I think that's part of the inventory design. Maybe we'll talk about that. One of the next concepts is talk about the fact that, like, in a Diablo style game, you have Tetris inventory, and we actually maybe in our next design video will showcase the Quill 18 created created an inventory game, and I found another one, so it's really cool. But we thought it was really bad because, and that's sort of it though. It's like in carrying your inventory, it's like you either play with Tetris, you have unlimited inventory, or you had weight, and we thought weight was really bad, but it also adds some design choices. Anyway, so that's the conclusion of this game design number 3, or see description before 4 for the actual name, but it's sort of under this game design playlist on YouTube. So we really appreciate people's comments, and just mostly the comments is just any feedback. And so we're going to be talking about next. We wrote a long time ago. We wrote an idea, and we talked about it in the channel update. Is design art or science? And that's sort of where we're at now. Is that there is this big difference between talking about the art of game design versus the actual science of program, and getting it down to the exact, and that's why in computer, I think computer is sort of in the arts and science, but it's computer science, and you learn how to develop games, and that's sort of why I think it's, but that's sort of a prelude to that, and then maybe we'll talk about weight, and might release. I'd never released that video, and I talked about doing it, which is sort of this inventory management, sort of, and that's sort of the preface to this is this idea that you're this type of warrior is sort of how I think people imagine it, but then it's like this is the type of maybe a mercenary or bounty hunter, and we'll still probably call it a warrior. I think we're sort of going to get away from classes in sort of this aspect as well. Anyway, so that's the game design. I think that's it. Oh yeah, and we have Hamlet. It's on Steam now. You can sort of see that our character is he's I don't know, looks like more like a dwarf, but it's sort of our character design. That's kind of our human, and then he has no. You start out the game, you have no. You're unknown in the campaign mode, especially you have no idea who you are, and that's how we feel like you should just start the game. You start the game, and then you can go maybe pick up an axe to cut down trees. So it's like then it gets into skill based and various things also, but right now you can just pick up the axe and just chop down trees and progress in the game. So I work for a company called Haven Studios. My public email address is support at havenstudios.net, and then I probably will. This is the last time I'm thinking about leaving. Just please leave a comment, and I'm very open to contact. So, anyways, thanks very much. You have a great day. I'll see you next time.